Hey Tim, how are you? Another busy day.
Yes, I can hear those words echoing in my ear, Liam, when we said, will we have enough to talk about every single day?
Yeah, it's crazy. The list seems to get longer and longer every day at the moment too.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, so obviously we've got some news on the commercial relief. Now I know we've got a webinar tomorrow, which is at 10:30. We're going to talk to fair trading, but we're also going to go into the commercial relief in more detail because it's quite complex. But in short, what does it mean?
Yeah, so what it means is that they've given us a code now with a series of guidelines, if you will, within the code. And they've said this is a consistent approach right across the nation, except for the legislation, which will make it not consistent right across the nation. There's so much in there, Leanne, to try and absorb. And to be frank with you, I think it's probably going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. So I went through this morning and did a précis of what I saw in there, and came away with about 35 sort of observations and questions, and that's just me, and I know other people are looking at it as well. It is a real concern to me, and when I say, I'm not trying to be clever when I say it's going to cause more problems than it's going to solve, because I know that there's agents out there now doing deals. They're saying to tenants, look, you know, I know you can't pay it, I know you can't do that, so let's do a deal and we'll sort it out. And there's lots of that happening. And now what's going to happen with the code is it's going to fence people in, if you will, and make them negotiate within these boundaries. And I think the flexibility that we've currently got would be a lot better. But you know, there they are.
Careful what you wish for, I guess, is the answer to that.
Yeah.
And so how are property managers going to be able to determine the downturn in revenue? Because it specifically says that they have to be able to go to the job seeker, be part of the job seeker program, which means 30% down in revenue. Do we know any detail around that, or can REI provide any assistance in getting documentation or something like that? Property
one of the great fears that I have of doing this every afternoon is that all I ever say is I don't know, and so I'm going to end up with a dreadful reputation. You know, there's just no information here. But it's another one of those things that they say, yes, you've got to determine if there is a 30% drop in your turnover. Yeah. So that of itself is an interesting question on turnover, because turnover to me is different to revenue. But then the second thing is, if you've had a 30% drop, as you rightly point out, is that from, let's say, March last year or from last week? Yep. I mean, I don't know that. And let's assume that I did know that. Then the next question is, what documents would I be looking at to determine that that reduction of 30+%? Now, I don't know. And if you, as the tenant, gave me your financial statements and said, here, I just printed it off my MYOB, I think the landlord would say, well, that's great, but can you go and get them audited and then bring them back to me? So it is a real issue. And there is, like I said earlier, they've given us this, but it really does pose more questions than answers.
Well, I expect that you're going to be up all night trying to give us some more answers that we can bring to our members at tomorrow's webinar. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I think that's right.
Now, what happens with those businesses? Because there's a lot of businesses that are no longer getting any income at all, right? Gyms, bars, nightclubs, travel agents, particularly those that are focusing on cruise travel. I mean, what happens? What happens with those? Like, how much rent do they pay?
Yeah, so another excellent question. So let's go back to the code. Now, the code says that if you're receiving no revenue whatsoever, then you would get 100% deduction in your rent, of which, when I say deduction, it means to say that you won't have to pay any rent here and now. And at least 50% of that rent would have to be a waiver of the rent, all right? Then the other 50%, and that's saying at least, the other 50%, you would, it would be deferred and you'd pay it later on down the track over a minimum of 24 months after we get through this pandemic period, which we're not quite sure when that's going to end anyway. That seems to be very flexible. So that's what's going to happen with that money.
But how can small landlords sustain that? I'm just thinking of, travel agents or nail artists or whatever in strip shops that are typically owned by mum and dad investors. How on earth are they going to be able to maintain, to cover that? And then what happens with outgoings and that sort of thing?
Yeah, all really good questions. And one of the triggers for it being 100% deduction is when the business is no longer trading. Doesn't trade. So if you can trade but choose not to, what does that mean?
Yeah, right.
And all of the outgoings, all of the outgoings there that would have been going through to the tenant, then that's another question. And if you are given some sort of reduction, so if the state government was to do something with land tax, for example, then whatever portion of that you got as the landlord, you would have to then pass on that portion to the tenant as a reduction. So there's a calculation to go on there as well. But the other thing I think that hasn't been recognised here, let's assume that I set up a company, just one, for this business, okay, that I've got, and I'm a super wealthy individual, and you're talking about a minute ago with your mum and dad investors, and I've got this company, and this company, because it's in one of your strip shops, it's not doing real well, but the underlying person, the shareholder, is very, very wealthy. I can turn up and go, poor me, I want a rent reduction. Yeah. Because this company is having all kinds of problems in that environment. So, it just hasn't been well thought out.
Yeah, wow. Okay. That's you literally are going to have to stay up all night and work all that out. And I want all of your answers by 10:30 tomorrow, young man. Okay. Now, there has been a lot of media today because we still have not seen anything for residential rent relief. We do understand, though, that has to come from the states. The National Cabinet is not going to make a call on that. So we need the state government to make a call on that. And there's a lot of media about tenants saying they're going to strike, they're not going to pay any rent, and agents getting abused by the tenants.
Yeah, so I should imagine that we'll have to take the tenants to the Fair Work Commission or something like that. Isn't that where you take industrial disputes when people strike?
Yeah.
So I don't know what happens when tenants strike, but I'm assuming that means they're just not going to pay any rent.
Yeah.
This is again another really, I can't use the words. I'm not going to use the words. But really is annoying, because what they've done is they've come out and said, here is this code, you don't have to pay your rent. All right, so people have heard, I don't have to pay my rent, and they've gone off and formed this strike committee or whatever you want to call it. But the code is all about commercial, all about commercial. Now, I know that there's something coming down the line about residential, but it isn't here yet.
And we don't know when, right? We don't have a time frame. We've been asking for it, but we don't have a time frame.
I think I've been bordering on begging for it today.
Yeah, you have actually. You've been on your knees, literally. So obviously we have got Fair Trading, and I'm very grateful that they have agreed to come and speak to us, because they're not going to be easy conversations tomorrow, but we will ask that conversation of them tomorrow, and hopefully by then we'll have some more answers. But I think tenants need to remember they have got an obligation to pay rent as it stands right now. So just because they're saying they're going to strike and not pay rent, that doesn't reduce their obligation to pay rent. And it also, they need to understand that our property managers are required under the landlord's insurance policies to actually follow a certain set of procedures. And that means when you're up to, you're 14 or 15 days behind in rent, we have to begin termination procedures, even though we all know we can't evict tenants. So
Correct.
it's getting so messy. And I know tenants are going out on social media and really giving agents a hard time for doing just that. But the agents have no choice. The property managers have no choice. I'm just so empathetic for what the firms are going through.
Absolutely. They've always been the unsung heroes of this profession, and right now they're going to be doing it so tough. They're going to be doing 3 or 4 times the normal workload and getting paid, as we know. People are going to be striking. Now, those very same people who are on strike, I wonder what they will say when their hot water system doesn't work, Leanne.
That's right.
What are they going to say then?
Yeah, I know.
On strike then, I doubt it. But you made a very, very good point a second ago, and I should have mentioned this. In the code, so back to the commercial guys, in the code it says that it's going to start after the 3rd of April, okay?
Yep.
But it has to be proclaimed or activated, or whatever the right word is, by the state government.
Right.
So right here and right now, the code has no effect. It's not in, okay? Now the question is, if a tenant hasn't paid their rent, a commercial tenant, for so many months, and we've said, right, you're out, and served an eviction notice on them, and that's gone in and been served correctly, let's say today, what's going to happen with that once they do activate it?
Don't ask me. I am the one asking the questions here. I've got no idea.
Yeah, exactly. I got no idea either.
Yeah. And the other issue, we've got so many overseas students living in private rental accommodation, and I was reading some stats earlier that about half of them, between 40 and 50% of them, are just not going to be able to pay rent because they're in all of the jobs that are no longer in existence, and they're getting no help from the government. So that's going to be massively challenging as well. That's got the potential to really cause us a lot of problems down the track. But hopefully we'll get some more answers on that when the rent relief package comes in. So now I know all of this is going on, but at the same time, there's so much happening behind the scenes at REI. There's so many other things that you and your team are working on. Is there anything that you wanted to cover off on before we go?
Yeah, as you say, it is a crazy time because we had press releases ready to go out today, seeking a 75% discount in the stamp duty, and the reason we're saying that is that we see it's so necessary to reactivate the property market, to get those transactions happening, because it's not just the purchaser and the vendor and the agent in this; it's everybody else, Leanne. There is the pest and building people, the conveyancers, the insurance companies, everybody gets triggered in this once you have a transaction, and for the government to not come in and see that and assist with it and to be able to stimulate it to happen is crazy. Now, you can get 100% of nothing or 25% of something. I don't think that's hard to work out. But
it's going to be really interesting. Obviously,
today, that was going out today, but we kind of jettisoned that because this thing popped up, and we've also got some ads, full-paid ads at some point going into the national or into the papers here, arguing the case for agents to be classified, agency practice at least, to be classified as an essential industry. And that again is just so important.
Yeah. That and a whole lot more, but we'll probably leave everybody with that information. And look forward to catching up with everyone and fair trading and more on the commercial situation tomorrow with our webinar at 10:30. So thanks so much. Always good to see you, Tim.
No, thanks, Leanne. Appreciate it.
Bye.